initially what drew me to or directed me towards the past lives was trying to develop intuition, mainly because people told me I had it, or they would tell me I was psychic actually. And I thought, wow, how come I'm in my 30s and I don't know anything about this? So in that process I was told I must meditate. And meditation for me was so foreign. I never realized that everyday people meditate for relaxation or anything. So I thought, oh gosh, I probably have to find a monk to teach me to meditate. And in that process, of course, I realized you don't have to be a monk to meditate. And when I went to my first meditation class, I found a lady on the internet who was very mainstream. And I went to meditate, and my intuition was really wild and awake, and I could see and feel and hear, and all of those 6 senses were working. And that meditation teacher, her name was Mary, she told me to read Many Lives, Many Masters. I used to go and sit in a development group with her every fortnight actually, and a couple of times she let me bomb their various groups and attend. So yeah, she told me to read Many Lives, Many Masters, and I read that book. It took me ages to find it, weeks, 3 or 4 weeks actually, and I read it in the day, and I thought, oh, it's the first time I ever thought this is what I'm here to do. It was like the biggest awakening. And then I went to her and I thought, I must have a session. I must do this. And I went and said to her, I'm going to have to go to America and have a session with Brian Weiss, assuming he potentially was the only person that knew how to do this, since he had written the book. And she said, oh, I can do that for you. So we had a session a couple of days later, and I could see a couple of past lives, and I felt them, and I cried in it. And most of all, it fixed the couple of things that I asked about as my symptoms. And I thought after that, oh, there's nobody in the world that could tell me that I'd made that up. I knew I hadn't made it up. And that was it. I thought, this can help so many people. So I thought, wow, I'm going to have to learn it. And again, I said to Mary, I have to learn this. She said, I'm having a class next weekend. So she was teaching it. And I went to that class. It was just 2 days in her living room. And it all took off from there. I felt like, I suppose knowing what I know now is everything is quite set, and that's why everything just seemed to fall into place, and all these people appeared who wanted to be regressed, and I was told from my guidance I must take notes of everything, keep all the case studies. And prior to that, actually, I was not a very structured person in that way, but I have since taken notes of every single one. So that was the start. Of course, after I learned with Mary and was working with people for about 12 months, I went to train with Dr. Brian Weiss, which was just amazing. Yeah. I can still remember it. I can still remember going to Omega in New York, because I had been told in one of my meditations before that I would meet a teacher. And in the meditation, I answered back in my mind and said, yes, I know, it's Dr. Brian Weiss. Well, they said, or the message was, no, his name's Dan. And I'm like, whoa. And I remember I announced it to my group. There was 15 or 20 people in the meditation group that I was running that evening. And I announced them, this is what I was told in my meditation. So there was no turning back then. I told them all. But sure enough, I got to New York and I had to go catch a bus at the Grand Central Station to Omega in Rhinebeck. And I sat on the bus. It was a huge bus. And I sat at the front, and being a tourist, I thought, I'm going to have a look at the scenery. I'll sit at the front so I can see out the big window. And I sat there. Nobody sat next to me. That whole bus filled up. And then the bus is almost full. This man comes on. He says, may I sit here? And I said, yes. And he sat down. I said, what's your name? Dan. Wow. Dan and I did not shut up. It was a 2.5-hour trip or bus ride. We talked the whole way, and it was just wonderful. And he was a hypnotherapist, and he said he didn't know why he was going to training because he was a little bit not into anything very spiritual. So it was very exciting. But he actually, in the meditation, they said there would be Dan and Dave, Dan and Dave, Dan and Dave. And I'm like, come on. Anyway, when we got to the college, Dan's roommate was Dave. The three of us were, they were both hypnotherapists. And the three of us bonded up and had big discussions about life. And I was a bit introducing them to all the psychic things that I had recently learned, and pendulums and energy and how it could work and that kind of thing. So it was indeed a big learning curve for me, and it was wonderful. And if I say the thing that I remember the most that Dan impacted on me was, he said, we're all volunteers, not victims. That one line. And everything was based on that for me from that moment forward within the therapies. It was obvious, actually, that there was much more to our lives than being a victim of our circumstances, although we're supposed to experience them. So that was the biggest teaching, actually, that I took away from my training, certainly from Dan.
I love the synchronicities, don't you?
Yes, it ensures everything happens that's meant to, that's for sure.
Yeah. One of the things you talked about early on in your book was how you feel that people who are sensitive, psychically sensitive, how they are prone for allergies and their skins are sensitive. That I found that very fascinating, and I wanted you to go deeper into it in the book. I kept waiting for it, so I figured that's my first question I'm going to ask you about your book.
Okay, well, this was the skin eczema specifically, but it would go beyond that as well. But eczema was something that people kept coming with eczema for sessions, and they would inevitably recall lives as witches. Of course, then what I mean by that is they were midwives and healers or shaman type people in whatever background they were from. They would be shown lives from that as those types of people. So, and I saw it so many times, and I thought, oh, there's a connection here with these skin conditions and this physical sensitivity. And potentially, I think metaphysically, when you get skin conditions as well, people can see them on us, at least if they're in view. For me, it was on my hands as an adult, but as a child, I was covered in it. Oh. I think I was harsh for my mum because I screamed all the time. She said I was covered in eczema. So I thought, wow, this is something that I was seeing over and over and over again, with parents coming to ask about their children or saying that they had it as a child or they had it now and they've come for a session and it would fix. If they came with it in the session, it would fix. So, but from that, maybe actually back in the early days, anybody that came for past life regression was intuitive. it seemed to be par for the course. And so those were my observations about our skin conditions.
Mm. So you attracted that kind of client. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think it had something to do because you did open up to your psychic abilities before doing the training, or?
Yes, I think so. But also where I was working, where the people who had read Brian's book, it was almost their introduction, almost everyone's introduction to the fact that past lives existed was that book. And I think because I was working in a shop that did sell those kinds of books and crystals, and they would do tarot readings and that kind of thing. So I guess I was in amongst people who were interested in that. So yes, I definitely attracted people who were of that nature or of that inherent ability, which of course we know now we all have. Yes.
Yeah, it's our true nature, isn't it? We're, people say we're waking, and your book, Awake, this whole idea that we're walking around asleep, but when we wake up, that we really wake up to who we really are, don't we?
We do.
Yeah.
We
And
do.
so tell us what your favorite, your personal favorite past life memory has been.
My own past life?
Yeah,
No,
your favorite
I
one.
I do love talking about my past lives. But one in particular is my favorite one because it was the first. It was the main one I ever had. And I was a young girl, teenager in Scotland in the late 1700s. And in that regression, I had asked, why am I in my 30s and don't know I'm intuitive? And that was one of my questions for that first past life session. So I saw myself as this girl, and I could see it clearly. I could see myself in the clothing I was wearing, and I could see that I did indeed. People would come to our little cottage, and they would put their hands over mine, and I must have been able to read them. I would say lovely things to them, and they would go away feeling good. But I also I knew what fungus and leaves and herbs and things to mash up together to create poultice to put on their wounds. So if you like, I was a little town healer. And I came to discover that I learned this from my mother. She had died by the time I saw myself in that past life. But that past life, I was to be hung.
Wow.
And the second question that I'd asked about to find out about in phobias was, why could I not speak in front of people? I literally couldn't. And I would feel like I was going to faint, get all sweaty. And so I asked about that as well. So in that same life, I was to be hung from making poultice and maybe telling people they were going to be okay. And it shut me up, shut me down. But what was interesting in that life was somebody let me off the platform. I was in a little village in the middle of the platform. In the middle of the village, they had the platform set up because they must have publicly hung us, and everyone was there jeering, to, kill the witch, that kind of thing. And I didn't see the person, but I knew someone let me off there by moving their eyes, and I knew that I could run right then. And I ran, and I saw myself running up away. And I remember thinking, why wouldn't they just chase me? I'm one young little teenage girl, and there was people everywhere. But of course, I think, of course, they were afraid because they were told you're a witch. They didn't know what that meant. So anyway, I ran out of town, and I did die not long later. Anyway, I became ill. Could tell I had fever and everything. But many years later, probably 15 years later, I met someone who was also in hypnotherapy and with past lives being the main specialty. And I met them. It was a man who's substantially younger than me. And I know when I meet someone when there's something more to the meeting. So I'm like, oh, there's something about this. And he felt the same. So we went off on our own. Being these hypnotherapists, you don't want to throw it all out there so that it can't be verified. So we were like, let's meditate on this and we'll find out where it's from. And I was told that it was from that witchy time. And so I've got this information, and he came back and we discussed that. We realized it was from that time. Of course, he would have his perspective and I mine. And I thought, well, I'm going to have a friend regress me and see if I can find out what was the time, where did it come from? And it was literally from that life, that same life in Scotland. And I came to discover that he was the governor. In the past life, he was the governor, and he had sent, and I wanted to know, why would he save me? Because they essentially tell you who they send them for you to kill you. It's like, why would he save me? So I came to discover that he must have been injured in battle, and my mother had cured him or helped him become well again. So he had sent his men came to my cottage to get me. He sent 2 of them on horses, and they came to get me. And I remember, or I could recall, that I wasn't afraid of them, but they were questioning me. Did I know how to make these poultices? And how did I know what I was doing? And they made me go with them. And I said, I can't go with you. I have a little brother. And they took me anyway. So I walked behind the horses to where this man was, this governor. And when I got there, he was questioning me and asking me, did I know what to do to help heal? And so I came to know that his son, who was my age, we were teenagers, 17 or 18, around that age, he was very ill. And they'd come to get me. He didn't want his boy to die, so came to get me, bring me back. Or actually, they were looking for my mother to come and heal him. And I saw in the second regression that I did that I didn't heal him. It actually ran its course, but they didn't know enough then about medicine and how things ran their course. But what I knew was he had syphilis, because I could literally see the lesions on his skin and how ill he was. And I was a bit of a little nurse. So I had to stay there and take care of him. They were not letting me go. And I would feed him this horrid looking, basically dirty water, and just make him feel better, as comfortable as possible. But of course, this thing ran its course, and they thought I healed him. They let me go home. And not long after that, I was to be hung. Because actually, not to do with them, it was because my little brother had been telling people that people come to our house and what I did. So inadvertently, it got into, I guess, the authorities, or the wrong hands, and they sent for me to be hung. Mm. So when I was there, that governor was on the platform, and he let me go because he thought I saved his son.
Wow. That's so intriguing. Feels like you could write a movie about that. Yeah.
Oh, and something else that happened in this life before I had that second regression and found all the details. I had been twice to that town in Scotland where I ran. Twice I had been, and I adored it. It was just magical. Wow. But coming back and recalling it was like, oh, it was that place. So it was all very connected. Yeah. That's my favorite.
And I love how you set really good intentions when you were doing your first regressions. So you got wonderfully clear answers. You know, sometimes people forget to think about what they really want to get out of something, but it sounds like you set those intentions, and your soul knew you were ready to get that information, and it sounds like it really helped you move forward then in your life, because now here you are, a public speaker, got over that fear.
It's so funny because uh, I couldn't have done any of this without that session, because I also couldn't write, as in I went through school covering my writing because I couldn't have people read it, just couldn't do it. And of course, after that session, it cleared that as well through another past life that I recalled. But yes, indeed, there was no stopping me after that. I started speaking on stage, and it went from not being able to speak in front of my 4 family members to you could speak in front of anybody. And yeah, it was almost like, shut her up, get her off there.
Yeah.
Time's up.
Oh my gosh. I don't want to hog all the questions, but if anyone else has a question that they'd like to ask Toni, I'm going to put it to gallery view so we can see everybody better. I know Jim is always full of questions, and John too, but feel free to jump in and ask a question for Toni. No, don't be shy.
I don't have a question, but I've got a comment. It's good seeing you, Toni. I did
Good
a
seeing you
session
too,
with
John.
Toni once, and it was amazing. I was on Royce's podcast today, and it turns out we're both great John Lennon fans. And he has this song, Dream Number 9, I think it's called. And it's about the notion that life is a dream. And the title of Toni's book, Awake, I had this, I've had in my life maybe 5 lucid dreams where you actually are in a dream at night and you know you're dreaming. And what I'm experiencing at my stage of what feels like rapid growth of some sort, and maybe the roller coaster, you know, what goes up does come down. But where it's at right now, things seem to be magical. And bumping into Royce was one of those things. But the notion awake, that we awake into this dream. And I hear people say, my soul. I'm coming to say my body, the body I'm in now, the body of this elderly white guy in North America. It's a very different perspective than I've had other bodies, other lives. And for most of my career as a hypnotist, I didn't talk about this at all. I was dependent on medical referrals, and I wanted people to think of me in a particular way. I presented at my professional association this weekend on past life work, and I began by saying that, you know how you watch a movie and it might have R rate and maybe disturbing to some viewers? I said, there's a W here, a woo-woo rating. So if woo-woo bothers you, you know, then no one, of course, was bothered. But going public with this, you know, it's not, you know, I'm out there now with it. At my age, I no longer care. In this incarnation, this body is winding down. I'm in the final laps. I'm 74 years old. I'll be 75 in October. There are a certain number of trips around the sun left in it, but then I'm going to need to go back somewhere and evaluate what's going on. What did I learn in this life? And my life partially in this is one of those of us who've been chosen spirits, not great spirits, not enlightened spirits, I don't think, but just spirits who have a mission to teach as well as to experience. And I think that's what one of my missions is. And I'm an amateur. I know for a fact that Carol, Toni, and Royce are far more advanced than me. I'm a beginner teacher. I'm trying to teach what I call spiritual kindergarten, not the advanced grades. And I'm fine with that. it took me a long time to get into this. As a hypnotist, regular hypnotist, I did things from sports to weight loss, stress management, smoking cessation. But over the years, people would ask me occasionally, they'd heard about past life work. Would I do it with them? And, at first I was reluctant, but I was also curious, could I do it? And I came in from that back door as a practitioner. Anyway, that was far more, but I believe the three women here that I know are magical. And my wife's in with the thing about this. My wife has always tolerated me and what I do. When I sold my advertising agency, I went to her Christmas party, and she told, this guy said, "How's retirement, John?" I said, "What?" She hadn't told anyone when I was a hypnotist, because she had an agency, but a hypnotist. I'm in the woo-woo zone, and I suspect there's more than one of us here. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
I think to your point about the body and the soul, I feel like each incarnation is absolutely about the person or the spirit that we are in this lifetime. And I think one of the misunderstood elements of reincarnation that a lot of people don't understand is it isn't for our soul to grow, because when we return to our soul energy, the moment that we die, we are back to that pure everything that's nothing and the collective. So reincarnation is definitely for a human experience and for the growth of the spirit that we are in this body each time that we're here. Yeah.
I like the way you go into that in your book, really honoring the body and every aspect about it. That was really sweet, the way you did that.
I feel like when we're working in therapy, people they're so hard on themselves. It's part of the purpose of life. It's part of the experience. But some of the things that we have access to, they're pleasures and treasures of life. It's like, do those things, make the most of them. Do you touch, taste, and sound? We don't have that when we leave here. So we should make the most of those things.
Yeah, we take it for granted, don't we?
Yeah.
So I know I asked you about your favorite past life, but working with so many people, and no names, of course, but is there a story about a client's past life that, I know I cannot help but be touched by other people's stories. And that's one of the reasons why I do this. I love stories. Was there a past life experience with a client that really also had an impact on you?
Yes, there's a couple. Do you know, even having done thousands of this, you probably can relate from working to people. I don't remember them. It's almost as soon as they go, their story has gone with them. But there's a few that stay, and I still refer to those same few that stay with me. And my first favorite one is, I hope I can tell it without crying. I think I must have been there because it affected me so much. But a girl came for a session, and she was a young girl in her 20s. She was English, and she had relocated to Australia, and she had had dreams, and she'd come to find out she lacked confidence. And she came along for this session, and what we discovered was we started as she was a young boy, and it ended up that she went off to war as a teenager, told lies about her age, actually, so that she can go. And we found that she had gone to Gallipoli in World War I. And when they were going to jump out of those trenches, they were going to die. They knew it. And they were kids in the trenches.
Mm.
they were teenagers, and she was 18 or 19, but she said they were 16, they're 15. There were other younger lads in there, and they knew when they jumped out they would be killed. Anyway, they did jump out. They had to. And they were killed. And she said she described what she could hear on the field, and no one was coming to help them. It was terrible. But what we discovered was, there were a lot more details than that, but what we discovered was her name. I only thought to ask it at the very end. We were out, actually, about to come out. I'm like, oh, what was his name? And she knew his name. And I prompted for the surname as well. And she immediately knew it. And we'd already found out what his role was in the army. And she went off and researched it after. I never researched anyone's past lives. My interest was to make her more confident, because that's what she'd come for. But she went and researched it and found that indeed this lad of that name had gone to war, and he was from Australia. He was an Australian boy from Victoria. And yes, you found all of his details, and it all matched up with the details that we had discovered. So I loved that, because it was the first time that someone had gone off and researched their life, and of course it was verified. But the other thing was that particular history touches me so strongly. It still does. I haven't really seen myself exactly there. I haven't seen my past life in that, but I had to have been there because it affects me. Usually I can't talk about it without getting all emotional. But that was one. The second one was a friend of mine. My friend, who was very involved in all of this with me, and she trained with me when I started to train people. So she also was familiar with how to do past life regression. But a long time after we started it, her husband, she's like telling him he should do this with me. And he agreed. He was skeptic, maybe not a non-believer, but highly skeptic and not into the spiritual realms. So anyway, I thought, oh, well, she's my friend. I'm going to regress her husband. He went in like so easily. He starts recalling things in such detail. It was fabulous. But what he recalled was being a child who's in medieval times, and the village was burned, and his mother had told him to quickly run. The mother was burned along with the whole village. And he went on to, someone took him in a new village. He went on, but the king's men had ordered that village be burned. So therefore his mother murdered. And he'd harbored this rage against the king for doing this. And he went with two people. This is all in his regression, much more detailed than I'm saying. He had two other men agree to go and kill the king. This king, by all accounts, was not nice and reaping havoc among the people. So they were going to kill him in the regression. And he's even kind of rolling his eyes in the regression like, oh, well, this is what's happening. I'm going to tell you. So he starts to tell me where they're going. They've made their plan. They go in, go into a castle and find the king. And two of them held him down, and they had heated up a poker. So a long piece of metal, heated it up and inserted it into his anus, so that there were no signs that he'd been murdered. And we come to find out that they did do that then. It was a thing. Anyway, they flee. They're not found out. They murder the king, flee, and he never sees those two men again, and he goes off to France. Can't be in his country anymore. Can't risk being found out. Never tells anybody what he's done, and he goes on to marry and have his own children. And on his deathbed, he tells his sons what he's done. And that was the end of the past life. But he came back and he's like, eye rolly, like, I must have made that up. But he was not into history or anything. So he'd seen the uniforms of the men who burned the village, and there were a lot of detail. He could see it very clearly. So he's gotten on the internet. That night, I was having dinner with my friends, and he comes and announces to us that he's found all of this history that matches up with what he said, even that a king had been murdered and they never found who murdered him. So all of the details were in line with what he'd recalled. And I love that story, especially when someone's a little bit skeptical or a lot skeptical. It's like, you still had past lives, and it comes in and they remember. So that's another one of my favorites.
Yeah, of all the things he could have, imagined, so many people wrestle with it being their imagination, but of all the things he could have imagined, that is just unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's a man of he was quite a very successful man, actually. So in the circles that he was telling people his story, it was like these people would not be having past life regression discussed with them. So it was magical, because like me, or like anyone who experiences it, you didn't make it up.
Right.
So it became something that he shared with everyone. So it was good.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's why I love that we're doing the work we're doing, to be able to give people the opportunity to have the experiences.
Yeah.
Once they have the experience, you can study about it, you can read all these different things, but now you know it in a whole different level, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love that you shared these cases, because I'm also, I sort of am a bridge. I have my therapist friends, but I also have my reincarnation researcher friends. And I'm wanting to gather some stories like that from my therapist friends, to be able to create a database of when we're able to validate, these memories that come up. So we'll have to talk more about that. I think that's exciting.
Oh, Carol, on the therapy side, I did forget to say that my girl, the client who was in Gallipoli, her message was, because I've always asked them, what did you set out to do in that life? Because there's purpose to it, even though it's such a tragic end. And it was to learn, I just always never forget that she said it was to learn strength and courage.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's
I still always feel like the therapeutic value is I feel like it's the most important aspect, because even when people come along for it and they say, I'm just having a session because I'm curious, they will still inevitably be presented with something that is helpful for them in this life, whether it brings back confidence or it heals something within them. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's so true. And, even in the last group regression, there were a couple of people that didn't have a journey, but afterwards they said their life had been very hectic that day and the week before, but they finally felt a sense of peace. They were able to relax and get a good night's sleep that night. And so, sometimes that is a good purpose too, isn't it? To get out of that monkey mind. And
yeah, so get peaceful. Or I think the underlying always result of someone having a past life session, whether it's with a facilitator or through meditation, is it alleviates the fear of death, which I do believe is underlying, and whether people realize it or not, it's the greatest fear of humankind. even though we know we're all going there. Yeah, so that's a wonderful thing to help life be a little more contented.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a perfect lead in. In fact, the very first words I ever heard about the very first past life I remembered consciously, and her first words were, "What is there to fear of death, but rather fear not living?" And it
Yeah.
took me a little while to understand what she meant, but how many of us, just as we're walking around asleep, we're not really alive either, are we? So the lead-in is, in this work, you cannot help but go through the death experience and the intermission experience. What can you share with us about that intermission, the other side?
The other side. So within my work, it always was past lives for some years. And then something switched and people were going in between lives, almost everyone for a certain amount of time in my practice. So, well, what I had read Michael Newton's books, and so I was aware of that in between phase, or how he had depicted it in a hierarchy and what happened there. But in my practice, it was somewhere that they went after having a past life, and it was much less structured than we're going to meet the council, we're going for a healing, we're going for regeneration. It was much less structured than that. But what they would get there also was some information to make them feel a lot better about what was happening now. I can give an example, actually. I had a client, a male client, and he was a young gay man, openly gay, but he was heartbroken, and that's why he'd come for his session. He was heartbroken. He'd split up with someone, or someone had split up with him. But of course, as part of his journey, his dad was a big negative impact on him and not accepting of him. They were not talking. They were estranged. And when he went in between lives, his soul group came, or these soul energies came, and of course it feels like the most beautiful feeling there. I remember he said, "What's he doing here?" He saw his dad in there, and he did not want to believe that his dad could possibly be part of his beautiful soul family. But of course, we know once you start working in those realms, you know that we do come with the same souls, not every time, but these same ones. And we're coming here to have a big experience. So they come in, and they often are the ones that poke us the most. So, and it was just this revelation of that truth, I suppose. Yeah.
Love that. I have seen that also, and I kind of liken it to that we choose to be players on on a stage to assist one another, and I've seen times that in the intermission where we'll say to each other, "What if I play the villain this time?" And just take turns. And it's much a lighter theme on that side than it is here in our human consciousness.
I do remember on that note, I do remember when I was regressed by Dr. Brian Weiss in my training, I made sure that I got that gift, I suppose. Anyway, he regressed me on stage, and in that regression, I saw that I was married to my dad in this life. And up till then, I was very close with my mom. My dad, I could take or leave him. And after that, I thought, oh, he is so important in my life. I've been with him before in another life. So I can remember going, when I got back from America and telling my dad, you were my husband in this life. And it was a revelation for me. And from that moment on, our relationship was just amazing. It changed everything. So I think when people go into either past lives and recognize someone, or they go in between and realize, then things can be healed between people, or they understand why they've got either a problem or an amazing connection with them now. And it's heartwarming for people, I think.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I know some of the researchers say that we don't have a purpose per se, but I just can't hear stories like this and not believe that we do have a purpose in each of these lives. Many purposes, really.
I think also something that I discovered is the purpose. I think people feel like a purpose is one big thing they're going to do in their life, and it's often associated with success, for example, whatever they associate with that. But it's not. It's almost the purpose of life is every moment of every day, and especially these experiences that we have that we never forget, that impact us for better or worse, but they have a big impact on who we become, who we are in this life. That's the purpose. I think it upsets people sometimes when I say it, because they want it to be something grander than just living life and you know, understanding ourselves and interacting with other people better. Yeah.
And it is grand, isn't it?
It's grand. Yeah. Mm.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Jim. Oh, my
Yeah.
nose.
Is Jim, did
Yes,
you have your hand up? Uh-huh.
Yep. I just was wondering, Dr. Reilly, do you have a particular, any direction that you're going in your work over the next several years? Do you have somewhere that you're working on?
You just asked me the best question possible, because you let me segue now into my absolute passion, which is the result of really studying these realms of incarnation, past lives. But what I also was told back in the early days was that my mission was to develop a new psychology. So that is what I did for the last many years, predominantly probably the last 10, but in fact, it's been the whole time where I've been observing and creating notes. And I developed a new psychology. We'll probably get to call it that again, actually. I changed it to coaching, but it's psychology, and it absolutely incorporates the truth that we are a soul. It's a soul that came into this body. And what that means in life, it impacts everything that we're doing in a good way if we are aware of it. So this psychology is a little different. I guess to dumb it down or to simplify it, it's that it's not just about the mind. And I think traditional and clinical psychology is usually mind oriented, and it's all about what we think and how we think and change our thinking. But the reality is, when we realize that the soul planned our life and we know it knows what we're doing here, we can access that, so it doesn't become just about our thoughts, which is really only available to us in the human body, but we can access our soul and find out the deeper purpose. For people usually only interested in their struggle rather than the wonderful things that happen, but as they struggle, they want answers, and the soul has those answers. And I feel like with a new psychology that believes that and can direct them towards that aspect of themselves, then what we see is extraordinary healing that happens fast, not over a long period of time. But also I came to realize that psychology was a little less for our demographic, or our generations, I should say, and more so for the young people who've come in or been born since the year 2000, because they are almost the opposite to the way that our life journeys took form, in that we had to learn to get in touch with our emotions and learn to express them and be okay with that, because in our generations we were told to cover that up. If you're emotional, it wasn't cool, it wasn't manly, you're hard work. No one wants to see that. It makes them uncomfortable. Keep that at home, don't bring it to work, all of that stuff. But with the kids or the young people that we have now, they cannot hide it, because they're inherently sensitive. And I feel like for them, it's going to be the opposite, where they come in quite emotionally intelligent and certainly knowing that our soul exists. And with that comes great change, because when we all know, because we're interested in this, it makes you a kinder person, and it makes you naturally compassionate for other people. And so what we see with these young people is they have that. All of them have it. They're born with it. So what will happen a little later is they'll probably need some of our knowledge on the mind and thinking to be brought into temper, that they all default to their intuition, or most of them naturally default to intuition, whereas we naturally defaulted to logic. And that is a grand difference. So they need a different psychology to help them navigate life. So they're so sensitive. Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah, it's helping psychology evolve, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just as we can't do this work without understanding that our very conscious nature is evolving, and it's as much a part of the human evolution as all the millions of years that it took our bodies to be where they are now.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. You get to find new words or new ways to work through that process.
Yes, absolutely. And the mission was to make it simple, to make it easily understandable, and to absolutely remove the kind of woo-woo aspects that were associated with what is so normal. So it was about using everyday language, that kind of thing, to normalize it.
Yeah. I have to tell you quickly that in China, I'm half Chinese, and in the Chinese culture, the word for shaman is Wu, W-U. And what it means is the ruler over both the physical world and the non-physical world. So maybe that make you think of Wu a little bit differently.
I needed to know that. I'm going to tell that story. That is wonderful.
I'll send you the character. You'll love it, because the character is actually, it looks like an eye, if that has serifs on top and bottom. And then the character, so Chinese characters are made out of radicals. So that eye looking thing is ruler, means ruler. If you just saw it by yourself, you would say ruler. So if you know anybody whose last name is Wong, W-O-N-G, that's what that means. The characters on each side of that middle bar is Ren, which is people. So that's why it's people on both sides, and we're the the rulers, the bridge really to beings on both sides. So yeah, I always ran away from the woo-woo also until I heard that, I've been learning Chinese, doing my genealogy. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, wow. And then what was really neat was when I was in China, and was the official in our group, not in our group, but from China for our group. And he recognized that in me, and he pulled me over to the side and had to tell me that. So that was pretty cool.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Oh, Carol, I'm going to include that in my teaching.
There you go.
One more thing, if I could add to James's question, my current mission is training teachers to teach this. So ready for the influx of new psychologists or psychologists who want to add this to their to what they're doing and what they know already. I think one more thing to that is when you talk to child psychologists now, or any psychologist really, they know that what they know is not working on these young people. So what will happen now is it will quickly, something that seemed almost impossible 20 years ago when I started in this is now like, it's so fast opening up and speeding up to be incorporated that I think in the next few years, it'll potentially make its way into mainstream studies and psychology.
Fabulous. I think you're onto something there.
Then.
And you know, you're probably tuning in. So this is going to lead into my next question. You're tuning in to the energies of those people who are ready for that, but they just need a little bit of an assist. So my next question is, because you do have psychic abilities as well as the knowledge about regressions, do you often experience progressions?
Oh, one stipulation that perhaps I put on myself was to never use the psychic when people came for past life regression. I wanted them to see it, feel it, get it for themselves. So I never used it in therapy with them, and I still don't. But as far as progression goes, I feel like as a facilitator, or the way that I teach it is, I think we need to use our intuition on what to do with our person and shall we go into the future with them. So yes, sometimes progression happens. And what I find is if it strikes me, if I feel to, then I will ask for them to be shown the future. Usually what happens is they'll see the future of their current life. So it seemed to always happen for therapy for that person. And in context, they might see, let's say someone's come along because they're heartbroken about a partner leaving, and they like, are they coming back? And their life stops. It stops for years because you can't move on because they desperately want this person back. And I found what happened in similar cases to that is if I prompted for them to see what's happening in the future, let's say 5 years in your future, and they then see that what their life looks like, and either that person's not coming back, which is usually the case, and somehow because they saw it for themselves, there's peace for them. They've made peace with it, and they can come back and start to live again. But I also, in group regressions, taking people into the future, we can do it. And if they're allowed a glimpse, they get a glimpse. I probably haven't seen them get great amounts of information, but they certainly get a glimpse of what it looks like. I got a glimpse of what it looks like. So yeah,
big little word, if, you know, if it's not us who's leading this, right?
Yeah.
That their soul is leading it. So if they're shown something, then it's being shown for a reason, isn't it?
absolutely. That's the preface of the past life regression, full stop, or in between or beyond. When people go there, I always tell them your soul's in charge of what you see. Yes, we facilitate we can prompt and we can get information, prompt for it, but really they're only going to see what their soul knows they ought to see. So, and I find that so comforting, and I feel like you can't really do anything wrong because it's beyond us, even as the facilitator, what they see and what's shown to them. It's incredible.
Yeah. Have you
Yeah.
thought at all about what the mechanism is of where those memories are stored?
Oh my goodness, the mechanism.
Maybe it's something for you to think about for the future. You know, just have your antenna up. I have so many questions about all of this stuff. And it's like, oh, to be able to have people that you can talk to about this is wonderful.
Ooh, Carol, I don't even know if it's stored. Well, it's stored within our soul energy. There's no doubt about that. But is it stored within us now? I feel like that soul only drops in what we need in this lifetime. Because I suppose from working in these realms, we know that we've had potentially hundreds and maybe thousands of lifetimes, yet when someone comes for a session, they see one life or maybe snippets from 2 lives. And it's like, well, how did they know to pick those 2 or even those sections of the life? Because think about our life now, how much is involved in it. Yet if we recall parts of it, there'll be snippets of any life. I find it fascinating. The soul stores it, I think.
Yeah,
Drops it in if we need it.
exactly. Yeah. I know that's a question I've been pondering for a while. So I like to ask people as I'm, you know, bump into people who might have some inkling of it. And I like to listen to people's stories, particularly on the other side, to try to create some kind of cartography for it. But the more I try to do that, the more I realize, oh, we're all creating our own matrix, if you will. So it's great.
Really is.
So what do you feel is the thing that all of this information that you have gleaned from your own experience, from other people's experience, what has been your takeaway to date? The lessons or important things that you have learned from all of this?
Oh gosh. Across the board, every life that we incarnate in has a purpose. Every experience we have has a purpose. I feel like that we are not coming here to learn per se. I feel like we are coming for the experience. It's for an experience that only a body allows us to have. We don't have it when we leave it. And I feel like it's all interconnected. Each life interconnects to the next somehow, some way. And I think, gosh, what do I take from it overall? I feel like life is magical. And if we truly focus on the good parts of it, and even we reach the good because we go through our roller coasters of turmoil, then I feel like life is better. One other big thing that I realized is there is a cycle of life, and the 3 key points are obviously birth, because we begin our life here, and death is the end point because we return to soul energy. But in the middle, we have grief. And I feel like grief is the critical turning point in any person's life. It doesn't matter. Different things set it off for different people. But when people grieve, they experience this extreme emotion that they cannot control, no matter what we've been taught, no matter how much we don't want to feel this way. we feel it, and we're changed at the end of it. We do come through the other side, but we're different. And I feel like it's our gateway to wisdom. So people who are not, perhaps their path isn't as ours all is, where we are doing some sort of work in this realm to maybe help other people understand it. But everyday people who aren't on this mission, they still get that entire experience of life, and they get wise after grief, more compassionate, kinder, more tolerant of other people. And I think each life is really about that.
So even a purpose in grief.
Yes. Wisdom, I
And
feel like.
maybe the grief helps us open up to our purpose.
I feel like most people potentially don't question, is there more to life, until they're in grief. That's why it seems this gateway to waking up, realizing that there's more to life, or more afterlife as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So something that's been coming up in some of the groups that I'm involved with is that people are either remembering or having experiences off-world. Have you had any of that?
You mean in different places other than Earth? Yes. Yeah, the whole time that I've been regressing people, just randomly here and there, that people, almost always, they will be people who had never considered such a thing, which made it even more powerful, where they go elsewhere. They'll call themselves blue people, or they describe themselves as much more energetic than Earth. But yeah, people definitely go there. I just call them other schools. Earth's a school. I think the other places that people go, it's still another place other than our pure soul energy, because there's a sort of incarnation in those other places as well. So it makes me fear none of it. Okay, I might be a little bit, if some aliens come into my bedroom in the middle of the night, but actually I wouldn't fear what they're there for. I'll be like, well, I'm surprised you're here, but so yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. And that's another thing about this work, is it really opens your mind, doesn't it, to so many different possibilities. I go back to that what if thing again. Somebody asked me, if at the last symposium, can you do such and such? And I said, yeah, if you're asking the question, then the answer is probably yes.
Absolutely.
You've asked the question. The thought has, some came from somewhere. So that means that, in the field of possibilities, there you go.
Even the films that we would describe as fantasy, it's like that came from somewhere. The dragons and the flying dragons and everything came from somewhere. It has to be a thing elsewhere.
Right, exactly. Centaurs, all of the mythical, logical creatures, where did they come from?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you would leave us with a word of wisdom about how we can use whatever we're doing in this body, in this life, to take the next best step forward, what would you say?
Oh gosh, on a personal level, I would say be kind, first of all, to yourself, and stay in your own lane. Don't have to get involved in everyone else's stuff, because they're on their own mission. They're on their own journey, and it's easier to stay calm in your own space and not be judging them or worrying about them. Yeah. Tolerance.
Those are really words of wisdom, aren't they? Thank you for that. You know, and I love how you specified be kind, first of all, to yourself, because it's like putting on the air mask in an airplane. You put
Yeah.
yours on, and then you take care of the others. And the same thing is true. If we can't be kind and we can't love ourselves, how really can we be kind and love others? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so if you take that same kind of energy, and now with the world in the kind of situation that it is, what advice would you give all of our humanity to help us live a better world?
I would say have past life regression. If you haven't had a transcendent experience randomly or spontaneously, seek it out and have it. It changes you. And I feel like the result ultimately is a calmness, an inner calmness. So, and gosh, if everybody knew, then we would truly have a world of calm people. But so I feel like I hope that they bring it into schools and things, and it becomes something that they do. You know, get the kids meditating and recalling something, having a little trip home on Friday morning. We're going to go and have a visit home. Close your eyes.
I love that. That is so cool. And we've got enough in our group to be able to maybe do an advocacy for that. So that would be wonderful. Well, let me change to gallery view so we can bring anyone else in who I don't mean to hog everything up, but does anyone else have any other questions that they want to ask Toni? Oh, and Robin has joined us. He's also a regression therapist and trained with QHHT. So we've got an entourage here.
Woohoo! Carol, I can see James King is there. James, I just want to say hello. He's in France and he got up in the middle of the night.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us, James, and Toni. Thank you, and everyone else who was able to join us this evening. And I hope you will pick up Toni's book, enjoy it. It's a quick read, and her stories about your childhood and all of the bumps on your road. It did feel like a roller coaster ride at times. So that was a perfect segue for this evening, and continue working on that mission that you're working on.